Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on inclusive teacher preparation. This webinar is part in a series of webinars that we are providing throughout the California State University system to provide resources and information to our colleagues across the state to improve educator preparation. I'm Marquita Greneau-Shire. I have the pleasure of serving as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Educator Preparation and Public School Programs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today. So our focus today is on developing inclusive schools, and as you know, inclusion or inclusive schools have been defined and conceived in many ways over the last several decades. At the heart of all these definitions is the idea of good schooling for all students, where each and every learner is valued and educated together, and where their respective needs are met by teams of educators working alongside families. Inclusive teacher preparation programs, and you're going to hear about these today, demonstrate several or embody several components. First, we prepare candidates to care about the whole student. Secondly, our candidates know their content deeply. Third, we teach our candidates to understand the complex ways that their diverse students learn. Fourth, we ensure that they develop and provide meaningful learning experiences. And then finally, that our candidates work together in collaboration with other educators and families to best meet the needs of each and every learner. The purpose of this webinar is to share effective and emerging practices regarding inclusive schooling for all students in California, and to discuss how we might work across disciplines and across PK-12 and higher education to ensure high-quality inclusive teacher preparation. So I'm very pleased to introduce my colleagues. We will begin with Mary Vixie Sandy, Executive Director for the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and then followed by Christine Olmsted, Associate Superintendent, Orange County Department of Education. We're also pleased to have Mary Brunell, Center Director of CEDAR and Professor of Special Education at the University of Florida. And then I'm very pleased to have my colleagues from Long Beach State, Shireen Pavri, Dean, Kara Richards Tutor, and Shelley Hsu, faculty members. And then joining us from Cal State LA are Diane Fozzie, Associate Dean, and Andrea Zetlin, faculty members at Cal State LA, and then Kimberly Coy and Colleen Torgeson, faculty members at Fresno State, and then Fred Huey is also with us today, who will help to facilitate some answers and a discussion at the end of this webinar. So Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Marquita, and good morning to all. It's a pleasure to join you this morning. So the Commission on Teacher Credentialing has been engaged in a multi-year, cross-agency effort to address needed changes in the way special education students are served in California's public schools. This work was launched following the release of the statewide Special Education Task Force report in 2015. This landmark report set the stage for changes we are making in credentialing, calling for the development of a one-system approach wherein general education and special education work together seamlessly to address the needs of all students as soon as those needs are apparent. Within that system, students with disabilities receive appropriate services, learn in classrooms that are guided by rigorous standards alongside their general education peers when appropriate, and are equipped to make their own way as adults. Progress has been made on many fronts as California's education leaders and policymakers have initiated systemic changes to realize this vision, perhaps most notably in the development of a new framework focused on implementing a multi-tiered system of support for all of California's students, which Christine Olmsted will tell us more about presently. Central to the effective implementation of this system is collaboration and coordination across the numerous educational and service agencies that influence how children are educated. Special education teachers hold a critical place in this system, selecting, designing, and delivering appropriate early intervening services, and when it becomes apparent that extra, scaffolded, and targeted supports are not producing the desired effect, providing the additional special education services that only a teacher trained specifically for this role can provide. It is against this backdrop, and with this bold vision in mind, that the Commission has developed and adopted new standards for the preparation and development of all teachers, those serving students in general education and education specialists who provide educational and support services across an array of settings. So this slide before you today, right now, provides a timeline for the work that has been undertaken since the Special Education Task Force was first published. In 2015, general education program standards were adopted, followed within 6 months by the adoption of new teaching performance expectations, or TPEs, for multiple and single subject credentials. Teaching performance assessments used in general education were updated to meet these new standards between 2016 and 2018. In February of 2018, the Commission adopted a new credential structure for the Education Specialist credential, moving from 7 to 5 credentials in this area. Performance expectations and subject matter competency requirements for education specialists serving deaf and hard of hearing, visually impaired, and early childhood populations were adopted in mid-2018. Finally, program standards, teaching performance expectations, and new titles for the mild, moderate, and moderate severe credentials were adopted in August of 2018. It has been a very busy time for all of us, you in the field as well as those of us at the state level. So the new general education program standards and TPEs anticipate inclusion and focus on preparing general education teachers for these classrooms. Learning to work as part of a coordinated team to meet student learning and support needs within multi-tiered systems of supports is a strong theme in these new standards. Culturally responsive teaching is another recurring theme in the general ed TPEs, which also focus on development of teacher knowledge and ability to implement universal designs for learning and positive behavioral interventions and supports in their teaching practice. This slide provides a conceptual frame for the ways in which we see general education and special education preparation overlapping in mutually informative and, we hope, beneficial ways. Changes in the teaching performance expectations support the intent that they serve as a universal foundation for the preparation of all teachers, the common trunk, if you will, with the further expectation that general education and special education teacher candidates will learn the fundamentals of teaching together through common courses that are applied and adapted to their particular credential areas. Multiple subject, single subject, and education specialist credentials will develop out of this common trunk, ensuring a shared base of teaching knowledge and building collaboration into the culture and practice of all teachers at the point of preparation. As credential candidates move through their general preparation and into specialized credential areas, they will encounter and master TPEs that are specifically tailored to the credential they are seeking. The tree depicted in this slide then reflects the movement from 7 distinct education specialist credentials to 5. The low incidence credentials for language and academic development and physical and health impairments were retired, and preparation in these critical areas has been built into the remaining 5 credentials and their TPEs. Please note that the name significant support needs depicted on one of the branches of this tree has been updated to extensive support needs. So continuing with the theme of common preparation, the mild to moderate and extensive support needs credentials share common TPEs where specific knowledge, skills, and abilities overlap and have distinct TPEs where their areas of specialization diverge. More specific language has been included in both credentials for orthopedic impairments, physical and health impairments, and traumatic brain injury. Preparation in the areas of autism and working with English learners continues to be embedded in all credentials. So all 5 types of preliminary education specialist credential are subject to the same set of program standards, which follow the same domains as the general education standards, which we hope will support program development at the campus level as you're looking to coordinate the common trunk and addressing that together. All education specialist programs are expected to fully transition to the new standards and the TPEs by the fall of 2021, and transition plans are expected to be submitted by December 2020 to the Commission. I'd like to turn now to what are some of the next steps in this kind of long-term effort that we've undertaken. As you probably noticed, Governor Newsom's proposed budget calls for the development of a new teaching performance assessment for education specialists. Those of you familiar with general education programs are likely aware of the TPA that has been in use in these programs for the last decade and more. Our early thinking is that a special education TPA will likely follow the basic structure and blueprint of the California Teaching Performance Assessment that's been recently redesigned, with a focus on the education specialist TPEs and specifically on the settings in which special education candidates are completing clinical practice. Some programs we know have been using one of the existing TPA models for this purpose already in their special ed preparation programs. We're very interested in learning more from you about how that's been working. As is the Commission's norm, we expect to appoint an expert design team to begin work next fiscal year, setting the stage for possible implementation of a new special ed TPA at the state level by the year 2022-23. So the timing for program transition to new standards we think is well suited for the discussions we expect to have with program faculty and others in the coming months about how a performance assessment can best support the development of education specialist candidates. So we're also working on finalizing credential authorizations for the mild to moderate and extensive support needs credentials, which will focus on meeting individual student needs across disability categories and differ based on the intensity of student support needs. This is a shift in the focus of the authorization of these credentials that we think is important and to bring them current with current practice. The Early Childhood Special Education credential will be amended to authorize service from birth through kindergarten, and the DHH and VI credentials authorizations will remain the same. Finally, the Commission was charged this year with issuing grants to support the development of residency programs in special education. Many of you, I think, have participated in that effort. 3 grant competitions have been held to date. 19 grants were awarded last fall to support capacity building for local education agencies and their teacher education partners in special education. This is a very exciting development. Another 4 capacity grants focus both on special education and bilingual education simultaneously. 5 expansion grants for existing residency programs were awarded, and one of those is planning to expand into special education. And just recently announced, 26 new residency programs were funded in special education, 2 of them with a dual focus on special ed and bilingual education. This first year of grant funding could support somewhere in the area of 600 special education residents beginning in the next academic year. We are so excited to see how programs use these funds to strengthen the preparation of future education specialists, moving ever closer to our collective vision for inclusive schooling that meets the learning needs of all children. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Christine Olmsted now, who is the Associate Superintendent of the Orange County Department of Education. Christine?
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for framing the next part of this presentation as well. So Orange County Department of Education in 2015-2016 was awarded a $30 million grant from part of the the State Department of Education to scale up a multi-tiered system of support for the state of California. So the first thing we had to do was come up with a common definition of what is a multi-tiered system of support. And so you'll see it here on the screen that it's a comprehensive framework designed to provide effective technical assistance for districts and schools that support in addressing each and every student's academic, behavioral, and social-emotional needs in the most inclusive and equitable learning environment. And you'll notice that that definition supports what Mary just said in her presentation as well. This graphic that you see here is the graphic we use to show that MTSS is inclusive of academic, behavior, and social-emotional learning in order to support the whole child. At the bottom of this graphic, underneath the students, you'll see the words family and community engagement, administrative leadership, an integrated education framework, and inclusive policies and practices. All 4 of those domains and features need to be part of a multi-tiered system of support in order to effectively have academics, behavior, and social-emotional learning working all together to best support the needs of the whole child. When we talk about a multi-tiered system of support, it's a continuum of support where all students, regardless of eligibility, are provided the most comprehensive education in the general education system setting through universal supports. Whether these students have an individualized education plan, gifted and talented education, English learners, they're all included with universal supports within the classroom. The supports are universally designed and also culturally responsive. Some students may need extra support, which we call supplemental support, when they haven't been able to achieve the proper supports within the universal setting. And a few students might need intensified supports, regardless of their eligibility. This is one thing we work with teachers on and school leaders, is that students with disabilities or English learners may have other plans, but those plans don't take place of the universal supports, the supplemental supports, and intensified supports that students can receive within the general education classroom. You'll notice here that we also don't use the word Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. While it is a tiered system of support, what's happened historically is that kids get put in tiers and kids don't belong in tiers. We don't have Tier 1 students, we don't have Tier 2 students, and we don't have Tier 3 students. We have students who need support anytime at any level, and the tiers of supports is all that it is. It's tiered support. It's not tiering of students. This is the framework that we use that describes our multi-tiered system of support and the domains and features that go with it. You'll see that we have inclusive academic instruction, inclusive behavior instruction, and inclusive social emotional learning instruction. All three must go together to fully support the needs of every child. A lot of times you'll see within RTI or PBIS that inclusive academic instruction or inclusive behavior instruction are the focus. Specifically in the work we've been doing for the past 3 years in the state of California, we've lifted out that social emotional learning instruction is just as important as behavior and academics. You'll see below that administrative leadership, an integrated educational framework, family and community engagement, and inclusive policy structures and practices have to be part of your multi-tiered system of support. What we see sometimes is that there are perceived policies and practices that aren't actually real policies and practices. So we really have people go back and look at what their board policies are or what EdCo might be saying to really support the needs of all students. The work that we've done so far to train over 600 districts across the state of California in a new multi-tiered system of support is by using whole system engagement. We start at the bottom where the county, the region, and the state are sources of technical support. The district is the point of intervention. The district must have a strong philosophy and identity about how they treat all students in the most inclusive setting in order for schools to be the place of transformation. And ultimately, we all do this work every day because students and the family are the purpose of what we do. We also took time to align LCAP to MTSS. MTSS is the driver for LCAP implementation. The LCAP is the district's local control accountability plan, and there's 3 big buckets that the district writes to: goals and actions and services, conditions for learning, engagement, and pupil outcomes. In order to drive those 3 big buckets, a multi-tiered system of support supports conditions of learning through making sure all students, regardless of age, race, zip code, language, physical challenge, intellectual ability, capacity, have the most inclusive learning environment. Engagement, you'll see again that families and communities must be partners in this work. And for pupil outcomes, all students must be allowed a continuum of support that supports their academic, behavioral, and social-emotional wellness. As Mary stated, the teaching performance expectations all include a multi-tiered system of support, and it's inclusive of all students. For more information, you can find these resources when this presentation is sent out to you. under OCDE.US MTSS, Guide to Understanding California MTSS. All our resources are open source and online, so if anybody wants to use these within their higher education classrooms, you're more than welcome to pull any of the information that's been provided here today. We have specific longer presentations for higher ed, and we're also developing an innovation configuration map to support implementation of MTSS at the university level. Thank you. Next up, we have Mary Brownell, who will talk to us about inclusive teacher preparation for diversity and national best practices. Mary is the Center Director for the Collaborative for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform, CEDAR, and Professor of Special Education, University of Florida. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Christine. I'm very proud to be part of your work in California. What you're doing is impressive. And today I'm sort of going to provide a conceptual framework from our center that you'll see is attached to the work that you're doing in California. Our mission at the CEDAR Center is to work with states to create aligned professional learning systems with a focus on initial preparation in the center that provide teachers and leaders effective opportunities to learn how to improve and support core and specialized instruction in inclusive settings that enable students with disabilities to achieve college and career-ready standards. Of course, this is a pretty lofty goal, and it's quite a heavy lift, and I'm going to talk about that for a second. Let's see here. This is just really a short list of the things that teachers and leaders need to know, and you can see when I go through each of these points that even the short list is rather healthy. One, they need knowledge and skill for implementing research-based practices. They need to be able to provide appropriately rigorous content. They need to be able to support students' individual instructional and emotional needs. They need to be an effective problem solver. They need to be persistent. They need to be a fine collaborator. And they need to understand how to address the intersection of learning with culture, disability, and language. In fact, when you read this list, it feels a little daunting. And I want to point out that when you read the literature on professional expertise more generally, the description of what we need in professional teachers sounds much like the way we describe experts or more sophisticated professionals, particularly when we begin to talk about problem-solving skills and the integration of knowledge about students and pedagogy. And I want to talk for a minute about experts and how we get them. Experts are people who have the critical knowledge and skill and the fluency in those skills and persistence that allows them to problem solve effectively and be persistent in their work. By implementing their knowledge in practice, they develop the ability to recognize patterns rapidly, such as patterns in a classroom, patterns of students' interaction. Students with the most complicated learning needs will probably be best served by experts. But it's not easy to secure experts in any field. The challenge for all of us in education is that it takes a long time to develop somebody who can think flexibly and problem solve. Even though we see some novices who are good problem solvers, that is not the norm. It takes about 7 to 10 years to become an expert. And I put this graph up here because if you practice every day, you can learn by trial and error and can improve. But your performance starts to flatline because trial and error is really not a very effective or efficient way of learning. If you practice for a long, long time and you have some learning opportunities, you will improve, but ultimately your learning will flatline too. The only people that go on to be these truly highly responsive, outstanding problem solvers are people who engage in something that's called deliberate practice. And I'm going to come to that later on in the presentation. But deliberate practice focuses on the essential skills of performance, provides feedback on those skills, and helps people learn how to analyze their own performance so they can take measures to improve. The only way we're going to secure experts is to have a systemic approach, and that's the goal of CEDAR. And so it's very gratifying to see what's happening in California at the policy level, at the school-based level in the local districts, and then what you're going to hear about what's happening at the university level. So there's some key ingredients that we advocate for at CEDAR, and I want to talk a little bit about each of those. One, if you're going to improve the practice opportunities that teacher candidates have so that they can become somewhat better in their ability to problem solve than a complete novice, then you have to focus on learning opportunities that really capture the critical knowledge and skill that underlies effective teaching and results in better student outcomes. So you really have to step back and think about exactly what are the high leverage practices of performance, effective performance in teaching, and what's the knowledge that underlies those high leverage practices. The other thing that you really need are effective collaborative learning opportunities for teachers so that general ed and special ed teachers can acquire the kind of critical knowledge and skill that they're going to need over time. So that's the beauty of your focus on your standards and MTSS at the district level, is you're really building a system that's going to support these collaborative learning opportunities. The other thing that you need are policies that support and align with critical content and learning opportunities. The policies really should highlight those high leverage practices and that critical knowledge that candidates need to implement effective instruction and to work together successfully, because there's this nice set of collaborative practices that underlie working together successfully. The only way, though, everything can work together is to secure an alignment of initiatives. And listening to Mary and then Christine, and now after me, the faculty that you're going to hear from, you're going to see how California is really working hard to align its various initiatives to improve student learning. Finally, you have to have collaboration within and across educational systems. Otherwise, you can't create this sort of alignment, nor can you create a focus for learning opportunities and the kind of cohesive system and scaffolding you need to build within those learning opportunities. Oops. I want to talk about some tools that CEDAR has developed at www.cedar.org, and you can go to these and find them in our resources section. One is an innovation configuration. I put one up here that is authored by some of the folks who are going to speak next. It was designed to help people think about how to support English language learners and many of their literacy needs. It complements a variety of other innovation configurations that we have. The innovation configurations amass the knowledge base, both the research-based practices and the best practices that we have in particular areas. And some of your California colleagues have contributed to these. The other tool that I want to recommend to you is the high leverage practices. CEDAR collaborated with CEC to build consensus around some core practices that cut across evidence-based practices that are really the definition of effective teaching for students with disabilities. And I'll just name a few: explicit instruction, feedback, scaffolding, collaborating with parents and other professionals. And you can use these two tools together to really make sure that in your methods courses you're addressing those research-based practices while also teaching candidates the high leverage practices that they need to implement those evidence-based practices effectively and work successfully in both their coursework and their field experiences. Many school districts, I'll just skip back to this for a second, are appreciating the high leverage practices because they see it as an opportunity to build some cohesiveness from teacher education to induction and mentoring and professional development. The other tool that we've provided that will, I think, benefit all of you, and many of you are already using in the schools that we've been working with CEDAR, is our Learning to Teach brief that's also accompanied by a rubric. We have to provide candidates with the right skills and knowledge, but they can't really learn to implement their knowledge effectively with the skill set they're acquiring if they don't have repeated opportunities, and many of them, to practice effectively. So there's a whole pedagogy around developing experts and helping them to practice effectively. So let me just say a little bit about what you'll find in this tool. We argue that in order for professional learning opportunities to be effective for our teachers over time, they have to occur for a long period of time. It takes about 45 hours of professional development to help teachers learn to be effective in teaching fractions. So that should help you understand just how much time it's going to take us to help our teachers become effective across a variety of content areas and in collaboration. They have to become more complex over time. You're going to hear Cal State Long Beach and some of the other schools talk about that. They have to model what it looks like to implement the research effectively with different types of students. And they have to allow teacher candidates and teachers to receive feedback and learn to analyze their own performance. And in this tool, we highlight many of those things. And with that, I just want to say, don't hold anything that I say against the Department of Education. So that's my disclaimer. These are opinions of the center. And I want to introduce my good colleagues and friends from Cal State Long Beach who are going to talk about their program. Shireen Pavri, who's the dean, Kara Richards-Tudor, who's a faculty member at Cal State Long Beach, and Shelley Zhu. Welcome to you, and I'm delighted to introduce you.
Thank you so much, Mary, and good morning and welcome everybody. As Mary said, I'm Shireen Pavri. I'm Dean here at California State University, Long Beach in the College of Education. And it is my pleasure to talk today about a program that we are very proud of, our Urban Dual Credential Program, which is a program that we developed about 5 years ago in close partnership with the CEDAR Center that you heard a lot about right now. The Urban Dual Credential Program prepares dual credential teachers in elementary and general multiple subject credentials in a 2-year clinical practice-based model. The program is structured around 4 guiding principles: a strong emphasis on collaborative and inclusive models of teaching and learning that are situated in a multi-tiered system of support framework that you heard more about from Christine Olmsted earlier. We're also grounded in evidence-based practices, a culturally responsive pedagogy, and clinical practice where our candidates are placed in schools from the first day when they start their program. The program is open to both undergraduate as well as post-baccalaureate students, and they exit the program with deep understanding of the Common Core state standards, of appropriate academic content, pedagogical knowledge and skills to address these standards, and skill in collaborating with the diverse families and students and communities that they will work in. So with that brief introduction, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to two of our faculty who were integral in the development of this program and who currently teach in the program. Shelley, maybe you can start with introducing yourself.
Hello, my name is Shelley Shi. I'm from Department of Teacher Education from Long Beach. And our program UDCP is a true reflection of collaboration between faculty from special education program and teacher education program. And I was part of the team for developing the UDCP. And initially, when we're developing the program, we explored in depth the standards for both programs, which is special education program and a multiple subject credential program. And then we also look at the TPEs and map all the TPEs and the standards into the courses. And then we look at the courses across the board to make sure that the standards and the TPEs are addressed in all the courses. And you will see the course list in the next slide. And I'm going to say a little bit about the literacy courses that Kara, my wonderful colleague, and I co-teach during the first semester. It's a year-long course. And during the first semester, the course content is mostly about reading development, instruction and assessment, about meeting the needs of English language learners, and a little bit about modification and accommodation. During the second semester, the course focuses on Tier 2 intervention, and the teacher candidates assesses a small group of students, identify needs, and conduct intervention lessons twice a week. And the teacher candidates do their rotations in special education classrooms. So for this year-long co-taught teacher literacy courses, teacher candidates do their clinical practices 4 hours per week in general education and special education programs. And with the mentor teachers modeling and constructive feedback, our teacher candidates are learning various aspects of teaching and working with students at various academic levels. So each week, Kara and I drive to different schools to observe teacher candidates, teach lessons, and work with children. And on the same day, when we drive back to the host school where we have our class, we have an individual conference with each candidate about observe the strengths and the needs and the area for improvement about their teaching, about their working with children. And then in class, teacher candidates and we also share candidates' moments of teaching that was celebrate, and also we talk about issues and the challenges students face in teaching and working with children. So each of our class session is not about the text, it's not just about the content from textbooks and articles, but more about constant reflection about teaching and think about how different ways to improve our teaching and address the needs of our students. And I think the most unique aspect about our this literacy course, besides co-teaching with Kara, is also our supervised clinical experience for our students, because students become more mindful and knowledgeable about their teaching and about their children, and they also become more skillful at teaching and try to modify teaching during the lesson and how to engage the students. So they gain confidence about teaching and become more reflective. So finally, and I think it's a very rewarding experience for me to co-teach with Kara, because we bring into different perspective experience. She's from special education, I'm from teacher education. Now, I'm introducing my wonderful colleague, Kara, and she's going to say more about wonderful things happening in our UDCP program. Kara?
Thank you, Shelley. Yeah, and I just want to also add that it is a pleasure to be able to co-teach with Shelley every week, and we have fun, but we also develop as professionals, which is also one of the greatest things about this program, and how we in the developing it and then sustaining it, and how we have this constant cross-department collaboration. So it's just a really important aspect of the program. The other, this is just a slide that shows our program courses. Shelley talked about the literacy series, and this is just more for your information. I'm not going to spend time talking about that today. But the other aspect I do want to talk about is how we develop and sustain the partnerships with our school districts. And we have 3 partnership districts with UDCP. We're actually going to be admitting cohort 5 to start next fall. So we're in 5 years now, going on 5 years. And so we've had partnerships with Long Beach Unified School District, which is a large urban district, Little Lake City School District, which is a smaller suburban district, and then Garden Grove Unified School District, which is also a large urban district. And so I'm just going to share some ways that some concrete ways that we have developed these partnerships and then also sustain them through key roles. And so at the university, sorry, this slide is a little bit different than the one that I had. So anyways, key roles at the university are, we have the university administrator that we do, that does regular check-ins with our superintendents, and that's Shireen. And so she meets regularly with folks from our area, different superintendents. And so that's an important aspect of our ongoing partnerships. The second is the university program coordinator for UDCP, which is usually me. And so I have regular meetings with district administration and principals in the schools that we're at. And I do want to highlight how important it is to be meeting regularly with district administration. When that wasn't happening in our partnerships, things started to fall through the cracks, and there just wasn't somebody at the top that could sort of help us move forward in the partnership, and so that became difficult. So I think that as others, for those of you starting to work through these types of programs and developing and sustaining partnerships, that's something that would be really important to have, as well as the meeting with the principals in the schools that you're working in. And then the other role in the key role in the partnership is the university faculty and supervisors. So checking in with teachers, troubleshooting, monitoring candidate progress as they move through the program. In the district, I talked about the district administrators, so meeting with them twice a year at least. Also, we work with them to select the mentor teachers and the master teachers, and also matching candidates with teachers. And so over time, we learn personalities, and we try to do best match as we can. I think we've gotten much better at that over the years, and that's been helpful as we get to know the teachers and get to know our candidates better, and working with those administrators to do that. We do, again, the principals are a key person in the partnership, so regular check-ins about teachers, master teachers and candidates. You know, how are things going? Are you hearing anything? Like, if the teachers aren't talking to us in the classrooms when we're there, like, it's good to check with the principals. Sometimes they want to talk to the principals rather than us, and that's fine. And so we do those regular check-ins. We also talk to them about their professional development needs. And these are also the key people that help us facilitate the clinical practice opportunities. And so Mary talked about that a little bit, and then also Shelley talked about that. So when our students are doing tier 2 interventions, we need like a lot of logistics to take place. And so working with the principals to manage those logistics are important. Also, just a few things about how just to reiterate some of the things I already talked about, but meeting with the key personnel at the district. One thing else I want to highlight about this is that because we meet regularly with key district personnel, some outcomes that have been really wonderful with this program is that now a lot of times we meet with the person who's in charge of hiring in the district, whoever that is. Sometimes it's assistant superintendent of personnel. but they have other titles. And that has been really awesome because when we get to know early on what job openings they're going to have, and they always want to hire our candidates first. And so that allows us to let our candidates know when those jobs are going to get posted for them to get on EdJoin quicker, to get all their things in, their packets in. And so that is a really helpful person to have at the table when you're working with the districts. I already talked about the regular ongoing communication with the principals and teachers. And then we have been able to help with professional development. One of the things with the principals I've actually been working on in one of our districts in Little Lake is helping them to have literature on inclusive practices. We had one of our principals come with us to Chime, which is an inclusive school that's affiliated with Cal State Northridge, which was amazing, and she had an amazing experience, and took some of that back to her site and her district to talk about how they could do things like that in their schools, even though it's not a charter school. And the Little Lake has set up a sort of like a subcommittee on inclusive preparation in the district. So that's been a wonderful outcome that we didn't foresee, but was amazing. And so this ongoing back and forth of learning, they help us by helping train our teachers, and then we help them professional development. And now we're getting schools that we all wanted to see, which has more inclusion, which has more MTSS, which has all students being served the way that we would want them to be served. And all the students meeting their academic, behavioral, and social emotional learning needs are being met. And another important thing is for that from our end, for us to be very flexible in how our candidates serve the schools. And that's another way we can give back to them by allowing them to be subs in the district, to teach summer school, to be intervention teachers. And because our candidates are in the schools for 2 years in clinical practice, it's fine if one day or multiple days they're subbing in classrooms, and even if it's not with their master teacher, but sub in another classroom, because they've been there for so long and they're getting so much clinical practice. I think when we have programs where you're just in student teaching or clinical practice for one semester, yeah, if you miss 3 days subbing, it's a big deal. But in this case, because of the ongoing and long-term clinical practice and partnership, we're allowing our candidates to be helpful to the schools and the districts. And then this is just the small things like coffee, bagels, lunches, thank you gifts that we try to do to just thank these districts for helping us, because it does place a big demand on them, and we're very grateful for that. Okay, so I am going to turn over the presentation to my esteemed colleagues at Cal State LA, Diane Fawzy and Andrea Zetlin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Diane Fawzy. I'm the Associate Dean here in the Charter College of Education at Cal State LA, and I want to thank our colleagues from the beach. That was a great presentation and gave me a few new ideas. We're really happy to be able to share some important work we've been doing with our undergraduate integrated teacher education programs that we always refer to as ITEP, and really to focus on the work we've been doing to build our clinical partnerships. We have had ITEP programs on our campus for almost 2 decades, 4 outside the college and 1 inside the college. It's called the Bachelor of Arts in Urban Learning, and we were very fortunate to be able to have funding from the state and CTC to be able to totally revamp our urban learning program to create a dual accelerated credential program with the bachelor's degree that results in a multiple subject and an ed specialist in mild moderate disabilities. And much like our colleagues at Cal State Long Beach, we worked across departments, divisions, and programs, and we used a lot of the framework from the CEDAR program to be able to share and look at syllabi and whatnot to be able to create option 3, which is our accelerated dual credential. I think we're going to focus today mostly on our clinical practice work, and we were able to get some funding from the Bechtel Foundation and some guidance in terms of this work. And just like Mary Brownell said, it isn't that you can create inclusive practices in the university all by yourself.
We really have to spend the time to make sure that there's an inclusive practice site to be able to place our student teachers in. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who's going to give us a quick overview of the Urban Learning Program and focus most of the time on our clinical practice work.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to talk about the accelerated dual credential option 3, and it just began for us. We had our first group of freshmen begin this September, so we're moving into this program slowly. Here's an example of the roadmap. Years 1 and 2 are the lower division years where they mostly do their general education work and begin their urban learning major. Years 3 and 4 is where we really delve into the teacher education part as well as complete the urban learning major. And year 4 is when they have the year of residency. And for a dual credential program, we need to have 750 hours of clinical experience. And we really want our graduates to have really excellent clinical experiences that prepare them to work with all students in inclusive settings. That means advanced students, students at risk, students with IEPs. So we want them to have the skills to work collaboratively, and we want them to be knowledgeable about effective inclusive teaching practices, tiered levels of support, supportive behavioral practices. So the challenge for us is really finding clinical sites that can be, provide the model practices they need for our candidates. So what we decided to do was to identify some clinical sites that would work with us and allow us to prepare for mentoring of our candidates at those sites. So we started with our largest school district, which is LAUSD, and the area surrounding the university is the East District of Los Angeles Unified School District. And so that's the area that we've met with administrators and actually were able to identify 3 schools that we've been working with. So this is sort of the process that we followed. And again, if you work with a large urban school district, it's probably a good process. But we met with the local district administrators and told them about what we intended to do. They helped us to identify the schools, and they also helped us to identify a team who could partner with us. So it's a team made up of the district as well as the university, who then met with the principals at each of these schools and then got their support, and then met with the teaching faculty at each of the schools, told them about what we had hoped to achieve, got their consent, and then conducted a needs assessment with them to find out what professional development needs they felt that they would benefit most from. Then we met with, shared the results with the teaching faculty, told them what professional development priorities they themselves had identified, and we established 4 different professional development dates over the course of the year. And we actually conducted 2 of the professional development workshops in the fall, followed by a focus group, which allowed us to get their input on how things were going. And then we're in the process of conducting the last 2 workshops in the spring with a focus group to follow. And the principals has attended all of these workshops, and the principals then are able to go into the classrooms and help to identify whether or not some of what we've talked about in the workshops is actually being implemented in the classroom, and to provide feedback to the teachers. Okay, so it's not letting me. Okay, so this is just a quick look at what the 3 schools look like. They are, part of, as I said, a large urban school district. The PD that we did at the schools were very interactive. It involved having the teachers bring student work samples to the workshops. We analyzed the work samples and then had them use things like differentiated instruction and universal design for learning and tiered support in order to plan lessons around these work samples. And it also gave them an opportunity to collaborate with their colleagues in professional learning communities, mostly grade level communities, so that they began the process of collaboration. Okay, and then we have upcoming what we've planned for next year, which is for the principal, with the principal input to help identify a pool of mentors at each school site who have displayed the kind of skill and leadership and an interest to be part of what we're trying to accomplish. And then we'll continue the professional development with those mentors. We'll help them to understand some of the expectations and curriculum of our program, and to really benefit from the best of coaching approaches. We'll also help them to continue developing their teaching practices that are aligned with inclusive and collaborative kinds of practices, so that they can continue modeling for our students. And then lastly, we want to develop a process for coordination of feedback between the mentors and the university supervisors. And then hopefully in year 3, we will begin assigning our candidates to these mentors, and we'll have regular meetings between the mentors and the university supervisors. We'll conduct seminars at each of the school sites, and be on our way. So with that, I'm going to allow us to move on to the next presenter, who is from CSU Fresno. We have Kimberly Coy and Colleen Torgerson, both faculty members there. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for letting us be here, and you're going to hear a few similar things after going behind both Long Beach and Los Angeles with some of our similar work. But what I wanted to first mention is that for us in the Valley and at Fresno State, inclusive practices are very important, and they're actually a work in progress. Some schools are doing quite well, and we at the university want to prepare all of our new teachers, whether they be in multiple or single subject or special ed specialists, to be those leaders in inclusive practices when they leave. And so we've looked at designing and making differences in our programs to make that happen. So our first practice that we want to share is the infusion of the UDL philosophy across our program. And we've had 2 decades of a dual program and having that core trunk. But we're finding now with the new standards and the new TPEs that we're sitting down with our peers in multiple subjects in the same room and really looking at what are those high leverage practices, and what do we want our students exposed to, especially from the start with expectations, and what parts of that can happen in the multiple, with our multiple subject peers, and what parts do we work on together. As you can see on the slide, we've taken an inquiry stance for this work, and our key things we're looking at are cultural linguistic pedagogy, universal design for learning, developmentally appropriate practices, and understanding way backward design. But what could have also been on the slide and has been mentioned is we are also moving much to a formative assessment coaching model in our clinical field work and helping our students see how their practices are changing. I wanted to also mention that it isn't just the work of teacher ed that needs to change inclusive practices in our schools. We also need to be working with our ed leadership programs. And so at Fresno State, we have talked about that across the ed leadership program, and they also have some assignments for their aspiring superintendent principals, talking about an equity audit, looking at gaps in services, but specifically gaps in scores and what needs to happen, interviewing principals about inclusive practices. And also they do an action plan related to MTSS because we need to have those leaders moving that forward as well. Our second practice we wanted to share actually comes out of some work done by 2 of our peers, Dr. Juarez in the Ed Specialist program and Dr. Chen in multiple subject, through some CEDAR funding, which was also talked about today by Mary, where we looked at one of our first semester courses, developmentally appropriate practices, and we wanted to make sure that those brand new candidates are thinking of the full range of students, and added some specific information related to how they can best include and serve students with exceptional support needs. So the 2 faculty members worked on this, and they brought it to the entire multiple ed specialist faculty to share. not just the people that are teaching that course. And infused into that class, teaching about peer supports, showing videos that highlight the kind of work, and having an assignment change where they actually have to demonstrate some knowledge as brand new aspiring teachers to working with a full range, including students with exceptional support needs. The third practice we wanted to share kind of comes through the lens of what you've been talking about with residencies and partnerships. And both Kimberly and I are special educators, but we also we wear multiple hats, as I'm sure many of you do. So I am the partnership coordinator at Fresno State. I do go out and meet with all the districts related to partnerships and residencies. And much of the work just shared by Long Beach is the work I do almost daily. And Kimberly is also our faculty and resident at a residency. So we talk about this lens not just from the special advantage point, but also how we're affecting our entire teacher prep program. So the third one is talking about how our opportunity now is in residencies, in our team teaching with district peers. It could be a curriculum specialist, a special educator, a reading specialist, that we have this opportunity to add the UDL emphasis with the curriculum that they're going to have to employ in their district, and be talking about some of the hard questions we have to ask sometimes about that curriculum and how we can make a difference in them looking for barriers and solutions and planning from the start about the culture of their class, all the students, and the learning. We work on behavior and culture. We work on inclusivity of families. And then one of the things that one of our residency districts does that I think is most helpful is when they employ the candidates at the end, they employ them and they put 2 or 3 at a school. And so when we want to make change like inclusive practices, which is sometimes difficult and takes years, when you put one candidate out at a school and they get subsumed by the culture, they're looking at putting 2 and 3 in a school so that those people can make the change, can go back to each other and have the fortitude to move on to make the changes together. And we found that through teaching together and through talking about this with the districts, it's enhanced both our perspective and our partners' perspectives in the district. So now Dr. Coy is going to share about her work in the Sanger residence.
So we want to talk about this residency we're doing with a school district here in the Central Valley. The Sanger Unified School District is a smaller rural school district that has about 12,000 students and is growing rapidly. And we have, to paint a better picture of them, they're 72% free and reduced lunch, 20% emergent bilingual, and they are on their 5th year of Universal Design for Learning initiatives district-wide. So beginning in fall of 2019, we are going to start a 2-semester multiple subject program in partnership with Sanger. We're going to have 25 residents, and we want to, what Sanger gets out of it is they have teachers that are prepared to teach in their very quickly growing school district. The residents will get plenty of professional development, consideration for hiring above other applicants, and they get a lot of technology in the school district. So go ahead and advance it again, Colleen. I want to tell you a little bit more about the specific ways we're trying to do all the wonderful work everyone's talking about, which I've taken copious notes on. But in order for us to do a 1-year, 2-semester rollout, we have all the faculty who are going to be teaching in that program will be team teaching. So there'll be 2 teams of 5 faculty in each team, and they will spiral their curriculum for the entire year. Both of those teams will meet regularly in faculty learning communities to plan, and in order to facilitate that meeting, the courses will be offered hybrid, so there's time built in for the work that goes around in the faculty learning communities and for team teaching. All the TPEs are introduced, practiced, and assessed within each course cycle, and we are hoping this year to infuse as many of the new special education TPEs, so we're ready to roll out an additional program for an education specialist in the following years. The faculty and coursework is done on the Fresno State calendar, but the residents will be embedded in the school district from the first day the teachers come back until the last day of school. So they'll end up having a total of about 930 hours of clinical work over the course of the school year. The face-to-face times will happen in chunks during the mornings 2 days a week within the school district. So the idea, they will learn their puzzles of practice and then go out and practice them. And the faculty have embedded in their curriculum ways to bring faculty and teachers from the school district involved in the learning and teaching, so that the idea is it is a really collaborative effort to have these students ready to teach when they're ready to go out there. So I want to go ahead and introduce the next person. Fred, there we are, and our contact information. Fred Uy, who is going to facilitate questions and discussions.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, that was a very enriching discussion and presentation, rather, and I really learned a lot as always. Okay, now that we have heard from the presenters, we are now going to hear from the listeners. So questions from the listeners, please put them in the question box or the chat box, and I will be asking them. And I'll try to get to all the questions time permitting. Okay, so let's begin with the first question, and this one is for Mary Sandy. She's okay. You mentioned about the expert design special ed TPA team. Has the call been out yet? Is there a team form, or when will the call be out?
Thank you for the question. No, in fact, the budget has just been is in the process of moving through the legislature right now, so we won't know that the funding and the opportunity are really there till the budget is signed. So at that point, we will begin the process of recruiting a design team to work on this. In the meantime, anticipating that it's coming, we have some very good opportunity for thinking about this and talking about this within the community, and we hope to begin that as early as next week at the California Council on Teacher Education and the CAPC meeting and elsewhere. So be sure that when the time comes, we will broadly advertise the design team availability and hope that we get some really good applicants for that.
All right, thank you very much. And the next question is actually for Mayor Brownell. Some people would want to hear again some examples of high leverage practices that you have mentioned.
Sure. So one for students with disabilities and other students who are struggling is explicit instruction, which is making concepts and skills how to engage in them obvious to students. Feedback, scaffolding for students with disabilities, intensive instruction, teaching appropriate social and emotional behaviors, assessment. We have several high leverage practices on assessment. There's 22 of them. So without all of them in front of me, it's hard to list them all off, but that's just some examples of the high leverage practices. I mentioned collaboration with other professionals and families.
All right, thank you. Okay. The next question is actually for Cal State LA. All right, someone wrote that within the 750 clinical hours, are these for Ed Specialist Credential Program only, or for the both multiple subject and Ed Specialist Credential Program? And they would want to have you expound on the wide range of experience the candidates may have during these hours.
Can you hear me okay? So the 750 hours include both the Ed Specialist and the multiple subject credentials. And we have our undergrad dual program designed to be in a semi-residency model. So the students will be at one school for the entire year. And that's why we're doing so much pre-work on the clinical partnership to make sure that we have inclusive classrooms where they can work. And so they'll have some experience at all three levels of the multi-tiered system of support. And so I hope that answered your question. And I think there was one other, so I don't have to mic and unmic, Fred, if it's okay with you. Somebody asked about dual credentials and how it integrates with internships. And ours is an undergraduate dual credential, and you can't be an intern until you have a bachelor's degree and have met other requirements. And so these are folks who would not be eligible for an internship credential.
Thank you. The next question is actually for all the IHEs. Okay, what kinds of supports do you think these programs are likely to need to ensure quality, and how are the IHEs thinking about supporting coherence between coursework and clinical experiences, and what are the biggest barriers to success will be? Anyone wants to start?
And these are related to the new state residency grants.
Yes.
Macy, it's Colleen.
Okay. Press no.
I looked at the question ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And I thought of three things. One is finding strong, inclusive site models to house a residency. Yes, we can transform schools also, but I think that's one thing. So you may have a strong teacher here, a strong principal there, but really finding the whole package in multiple places to set these up will be some work for us. The one that was just mentioned, the fact that almost all of our candidates are already working, that they get jobs immediately when they're an ed specialist. And so we've had some initial conversations about what that could look like, what their day could look like, what their semesters could look like, what the role of subbing and helping them offset losing the income if we wanted them, those kind of issues of just preliminary talk. And I think then the third, I wouldn't call it a barrier, just a challenge, is that the new standards for ed specialists having all the multiple subject, single subject TPEs, and then the mild mod on top of that, and then mod severe's cumulative of the three, is how many of us were prepared, because we got both credentials and we think it's really important. And we need to work to have them have all that knowledge, but we can't have them in school forever to do that. So the timing, how can we get that done in an amount of time and get them out in the schools working that it's not too long? Those would be the three that I think of.
Can I answer the one question about the clinical coursework and clinical experiences a little bit?
Sure.
Is that okay? So one of the things that the way we've been thinking about it is we talk about our clinical practice opportunities, and so we sort of decided ahead of time, like, what are the things we want our candidates to be able to do when they leave our program, right? So we wanted all of them to be able to teach tier 1 lessons. We wanted all of them to be able to deliver a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, to be able to accurately develop and implement a positive behavior support plan. And there's many more examples, but so we sort of actually grounded in the clinical experience, and then it just naturally ties to the coursework. And so I don't know if that makes sense, a lot of sense, but if you do that, I think if you think about the clinical experiences and the practice opportunities that you want them to have, then the coursework sort of naturally starts to align with what you want. I don't know, maybe Mary could elaborate on that a little bit more too with some of her work that they've done with Cedar, but I think that was a super helpful way to look at the clinical practice experiences through these practice-based opportunities.
One last question. I think this is for Christine Olmsted. Okay, do all the county offices of education have the capacity to work with districts and schools for the professional learning needs of teachers regarding MTSS?
We had 52 county offices of our 58 partner with us on building their capacity to support our districts for their regions and their local districts. So I would say yes. In areas where we might have some county offices in very rural, remote areas, or small county offices, they're partnering with another county office in their region to provide that support. We also have a robust team at Orange County Department of Education that goes out and supports in the areas where there might not be the capacity.
Okay. Mary Brownell, would you want to elaborate on CARE's response?
Yes. One thing that some of the programs are doing to deal with this coherence issue, which is very challenging, is they are working with the district to decide what they want to be the focus of their partnership. And so Kara talked about MTSS, but in Kentucky, at the University of Louisville and Jefferson County Public Schools, they worked together to identify the high leverage practices they wanted to work on and define them and come to some agreement about what all the teacher candidates and teachers really should be demonstrating in their classrooms. And other programs have done the same thing, like Grand Valley State in Michigan and Kent State in Ohio, and I could name others, but those are just a few that are really trying to work on setting up practicum sites that embrace the kinds of things they're teaching is by coming to some uniform perspective with the school district.
All right, thank you very much. And again, that was a very lively and interactive discussion. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all the questions, but if you have any more questions, please send them to me, okay, and I'll forward it to the right people, okay. So I guess without any further delay, let me introduce again Dr. Marquita Greno-Shire, who will give the closing remarks.
Well, good morning again, colleagues, and thank you for sharing your expertise and your time. This was a really rich and helpful discussion, and I greatly appreciate all of you. In hearing about your work, which I know about because I know each of you very well, I really had a deeper understanding of it, and I really appreciate it. And it reminded me of a conversation that several of us had about a year and a half ago, and we were talking about how the stars seem to be aligning in California. And so from that initial conversation, we have developed a grassroots organization called the California Alliance for Inclusive Schooling, and many of you have been part of this conversation. And this organization is composed of several people who are on this webinar today, and our goal is to really work across the segments from PK-12 through higher education to develop inclusive schooling for all students. And so while this webinar has really helped to deepen our understanding of the changes that are happening in teacher preparation, we have other resources through the Orange County Department of Education, which is helping us to focus on how we develop those good schools for all students. So the California Alliance for Inclusive Schooling will be meeting at the California Council for Teacher Education in Sacramento. We are hosting a policy summit on Wednesday afternoon, and we will post that information on this website as well. Let me thank Jennifer Wicks for her excellent facilitation. Jennifer always does such a professional job ensuring that the good information that you all are sharing is heard and getting out to our constituents. The most recent PDF of the presentation will be available on, I think it may be already up, lower left of the screen, so please use it and share it with your colleagues. I also want to share that with the support of our partner, the S.D. Bechtel Foundation, and the New Generation of Educators Initiative, the Expansion Grant, we will be supporting 3 of our colleagues to work with our CSU teacher preparation faculty who are interested in learning more about developing inclusive teacher preparation programs. So I'm pleased that Colleen Torgerson from Fresno, Kara Richards Tutors from Cal State Long Beach, and Andrea Zetlin from Cal State LA will be our faculty resource group who will work over the next semester or 2 to help continue this conversation. They will be providing additional resources and perhaps a webinar or 2, and perhaps some direct technical assistance. And I again want to thank Macy and our colleagues at the Bechtel Foundation for helping with this work. So with that, I thank you again for your time and expertise, and I wish you a good weekend. Thank you again for joining us.